Get into the heavy metal, which you see over here, this blue plane I'll be talking about. And now you're in a very acrobatic aircraft. So they can be able to have retractable landing gear, constant speed propeller. You learn gunnery, aerial gunnery and maneuvers, which means basically learning how to dogfight and do ground attack. So we're going to talk about the three airplanes types that we are flying here. The first is the biplane that you'll see down there on your right. That is a Stearman PT-17. The museums was actually made in 1941, and that was the primary trainer for the Second World War for the Americans. And actually, when this air base was known as Cal Aero Field, they trained 10,000 pilots in an aircraft just like that. It's very easy to fly. It's got fabric covered over wooden wings and fabric covered over a steel tube fuselage. The Fairchild, which is the yellow wing monoplane that you see down there, was made in Canada in 1943. It has an enclosed cockpit because it gets a little colder up in Canada. It has a Ranger L446 six-cylinder engine with 200 horsepower. Low wing monoplane. It's also very easy to fly. And then the blue airplane is a North American SNJ-5. Also known as a T6, but both known as Texan. It's actually a T6 on the other side of the biplane there. Ours was made in 1944. It's well built, and it's a fully military aerial maneuvers. It's used as an advanced trainer here at POF. It's got the Pratt & Whitney 1340 radial engine of about 550 horsepower. And it's also one of our biggest Hollywood stars. This aircraft was made to look like a Zero for the TV series Black Sheep Squadron. Was also made to look like a Zero for two other series. One was Pearl, the other War and Remembrance. In fact, it only actually played an SNJ once, and that was in the film Space. Now, one lady in an article in Aerospace magazine said she owned one because she thought that was the best way she knew to turn noise into money. Or is it money into noise? Anyway, we have four pilots flying for you today, and the biplane is Jeff Toland. In our BT-26, Cornell is Garen Swagger. The T6 on the far side is Pat Nightingale. And the SNJ is Robbie Patterson. Let's give him a big hand.
Awesome.
I'll be waiting off on heaven, counting every mile of railroad track that takes me back. Never thought my heart would be so dirty. What did I decide to grow? Gonna take a sentimental.
The advancing technology of radio, an industry still then only in its infancy. Radio is the technology of communicating using invisible radio waves. Radio waves move through the air with momentum. They can be set to specific frequencies and amplitudes to enable reception. These waves are generated by an electronic device called a transmitter that is connected to an antenna which radiates the waves. They can then be received by another antenna connected to a radio receiver, and then which would then reconverse the waves into sound.
And continued its use as a sniper rifle through the Korean and Vietnam Wars. But its low activity was limited, particularly as action on the battlefield sped up. This created a need for a rifle with a faster rate of fire. Let's meet John Durand. Durand was born in Quebec, Canada on New Year's Day in 1988. As a young man, he took a number of odd jobs, but one of his was favorite was working at the shooting gallery. This then turned to a lifelong passion of target shooting. Went to the United States in 1909. He gravitated to the trade of a machinist and was
Tank warfare originally came out of the trenches of World War I. It was viewed as a necessity to train for out of trenches. This isn't to say the idea of the tank had to come out before the Great War. As early as the advent of the automobile, the idea of the armored car, or even the tractor had been about. It wasn't viewed as a necessity for the battlefield. It was viewed as more of an extension of the cavalry. There's a story in the years leading up to World War I, the Austro-Hungarian Empire experimenting with armored cars with their cavalry units, but it decided not to go forward with the concept because, quote, it would scare the horses.
This particular one was an American-made version, made in '45. It pulses at 45 pulses per second. Don't try to count. What we're going to do is the team that's worked on this has got this working. So there's a story. This is not the first time that we've run this. We ran this about 10 years ago. And we had a veteran who was part of the museum then, a gentleman by the name of Wilbur Richardson. Many of you who've been here for years met Wilbur. Wilbur was a ball turret gunner on a B-17, and on his 30th mission, he was wounded, and so he was convalescing in a hospital in London when he recalled hearing the noise you're about to hear, followed by an explosion. So, flash to 10 years ago, and they fired this up, and Wilbur comes running out because he thinks we're under attack. P-38 Lightning in the back on the left-hand side. Curtis.
That was awesome, huh? Yeah, it was.
That was pretty awesome. Right, with Pilot Chris Fahey doing a walk around is the P-51D Mustang. So let's start with the Curtis. That is the oldest plane there in the series. The P-38, excuse me, the P-40 got its start in 1938. It was actually an upgrade of the P-36, which had a radial engine. It was upgraded to an Allison inline engine, which gave it better performance and allowed the airplane to have better streamline and increase the speed. It was a very strong airplane, particularly at the wing root area, to take punishment. And that is what we had at the beginning of World War II, used in all theaters. If you look at the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the P-40 is what we had there, and that's what was used by the pilots to take off and counterattack. Your pilot for the P-40 is Darren Schwager, getting into the plane now. Darren also flies our trainers and flies our P-51 Mustang. The P-40 is also one of our veterans here at the museum. This plane was actually flown by the Canadian Royal Air Force in World War II out of British Columbia, and it was credited with shooting down 2 Japanese incendiary balloons that the Japanese would launch. They would catch the jet stream and land in Canada, Washington, Oregon areas. We're very happy to have this airplane. Next is the P-38. Back in 1938, the U.S. Air Force, or rather the Army Air Corps, put out a request for proposal for new airplane requirements. Speed of 360 miles an hour, and also capability to climb to 20,000 feet within 6 minutes. We did not have a single engine at the time that was capable of doing that. Lockheed, particularly with the Kelly Johnson, one of the America's most respected aeronautical engineers at the time, and his team developed a dual boom with twin Allison engines, counter-rotating propellers, and with the twin boom rudders that are positioned back behind the propellers, and a wide elevator on there as well. It provided a lot of stability, and it outperformed the requirements that the Army Air Corps had put before it. This was used throughout all of the theaters in World War II, but particularly in the South Pacific and the Asian areas. If any of you have been to the museum before, you notice the 476 Fighter Squadron hangar that we have at the very end. The B-38 was used exclusively by the 475th to work with the American Marines as they were trying to take back the islands that had been captured by the Japanese. Finally, with the P-51D, back in 1939-1940, the British government had approached Curtiss to build under license the P-40. North Americans said, we're not going to build someone else's plane. We'll build our own plane. And so it was the engineers at North American here in Southern California that came up with designs, supposedly in 100 days, for the P-51. The first was the A, which is right behind you here. This is the only P-51A still flying in the world. It has an Allison engine similar to the P-38. It had its limitations. It was effective up to about 15,000, maybe 20,000 feet. It had a single stage boost on it, turbocharger. So it wasn't effective at the altitudes as the war progressed, which were up to 25, 30,000 feet. With the change of engines from the Allison to the Rolls-Royce Merlin, it proved to be a much different airplane. It was effective at high altitudes. It also provided the United States and our allies the ability to escort the bombers from England to Europe and back. And that changed the war for us. So folks, we're going to let our pilots start up. We'll have a quick Q&A afterwards, and we'll have our raffle as well for members after the planes are taken off. Thank you very much, pilots.
They're rock.